Sergeant Ayanna Ace Williams crouched over her rifle, the scent of gun oil mixing with the crisp morning air at the firing range, cracking a joke about how Specialist Jenkins couldn't tell the difference between a magazine and a sandwich, and for a moment, the squad laughed so hard that even the normally stoic Staff Sergeant Lopez cracked a grin. But then, just as Ace was giving her usual sarcastic salute to the target boards, the world erupted with the deafening staccato of automatic gunfire. From a ridge they hadn't even noticed before, bullets whizzing past, kicking up dirt and ricocheting with a metallic hiss that made her stomach drop, turning what had been a mundane morning of cleaning rifles into a nightmare straight out of the worst tactical training simulation she'd ever endured. And in that instant, every soldier in her squad went from relaxed banter to lightning-fast combat readiness, ducking behind the scattered steel targets and sandbags as Ace barked orders with calm precision that belied the pounding of her heart. Jenkins, cover the left flank. Carter, suppressive fire, now. Lopez, get the medic moving. And even though her voice was steady, her mind raced as she scanned the ridge for movement, noting the subtle rustle of enemy uniforms against the dusty terrain, the glint of sun reflecting off weapons, and a sudden flash that told her this was no random stray. Someone had been waiting for them, watching them clean their weapons, probably laughing to themselves at how predictable army routines could be, and she couldn't help but mutter under her breath with a wry, dark humor, guess we really AIE on target practice for real life now. Even as her pulse threatened to betray her calm, adrenaline surging through her veins as she dropped to a prone position, calculating angles, cover, and escape routes with a mental map that was second nature but still critical under fire, feeling the familiar thrill of danger mixed with the weight of responsibility for every soldier depending on her judgment. And in that split second, Jenkins panicked, firing a round two. Early and screaming a curse that was half terror, half frustration, which drew the enemy's attention, and Ace lunged forward, grabbing his shoulder with an iron grip. Keep it tight, keep it controlled. One shot at a time, like we drilled, she hissed, and even as bullets kicked up dirt around them, she could see Carter's knuckles whiten around his rifle as he steadied his aim, firing with surprising precision despite the chaos, every shot a statement of defiance against the unseen enemy who had the audacity to attack soldiers in broad daylight while they were literally cleaning their weapons, and Ace's mind ticked through the logistics. The likely size of the enemy force, probable escape vectors, and worst-case scenarios, all while her squad moved like clockwork behind her, trusting her instincts as she directed them to new positions, creating improvised cover behind concrete barriers, debris, and overturned targets, whispering sharp, witty commands that kept tension high but morale intact, all while bullets thumped dangerously close, pinging against metal with ear-splitting clatter, and she caught herself glancing at Jenkins, who was shaking like a leaf, and offered him a half-smile that carried both reassurance and a subtle warning, "You're fine. Just keep your head down and follow my lead," and he nodded, swallowing hard, fumbling with his weapon to reload, and in that chaotic symphony of combat, Ace noticed the first real danger, a shadow flitting between rocks on the ridge, moving too fast, too deliberate to be a coincidence, and with a flick of her wrist, she signaled Carter to shift fire, sending a burst that forced the enemy to duck, their strategy momentarily thwarted, and she allowed herself a brief, sharp inhale of air, just enough to feel the life around her, to remember why she loved this chaos, why she thrived in it, control amid unpredictability, leadership amid panic, and the bond forged with soldiers who trusted her judgment to keep them alive. And as bullets continued to shred the air, Ace realized one of their own had been hit. A sharp cry from Lopez made her stomach lurch as she sprinted toward the medic, calculating in microseconds the safest path, covering angles, and pushing her fear down like a stubborn tide, barking instructions as she moved. Patch him up, don't stop. Get the bleeding under control. And the medic worked with precision born from training, the injured soldier groaning but alive, and in that moment, Ace's mind flicked to humor again, a coping mechanism she couldn't resist even under fire, muttering, "Well, cleaning the range wasn't supposed to include dodging live rounds, but hey, at least the dusting counts as cardio," earning a tense but genuine laugh from Carter even as they continued firing, and she ducked behind a steel target as a round grazed the metal just inches from her helmet, sparks flying, and she felt the heat, the tangible proximity of death, sharpening every sense, making the mundane ritual of cleaning weapons a memory as distant as a dream. And even as they maneuvered through the range, creating makeshift firing lanes, suppressing enemy fire, and coordinating their next move, Ace noticed subtle signs of the enemy's preparation, footprints in the dust, discarded casings, and the way they seemed to anticipate every move the squad made, a clear indication of tactical intelligence and reconnaissance, which made her pulse quicken. This was not a random encounter, this was orchestrated, and the realization steeled her resolve, her humor shifting into razor-sharp focus. calculating the probabilities, calling out enemy positions, and adjusting the squad's formation on the fly, whispering encouragement mixed with sarcastic jabs that kept everyone alert yet not paralyzed by fear, all while managing the creeping dread that this engagement could escalate into a full-scale ambush if they didn't act decisively. And as she peeked over the concrete barrier, she saw movement on the far ridge, a flash of uniform, a glint of a weapon, and she knew the enemy was positioning for a flanking maneuver, which meant she had mere seconds to react, to reposition her squad, to prevent disaster, and her voice cut through the chaos, commanding yet calm, "Left flank, now. Cover the gaps. Jenkins, watch that blind spot. Don't move unless I say so." And as the squad executed her orders with precision, bullets striking dangerously close, kicking up clouds of dirt, Ace couldn't help but marvel at the sheer unpredictability of life in combat, the way moments of humor could instantly be replaced with sheer terror, and the way she, a soldier often underestimated because of her size, her humor, her tendency to joke even in tense moments, had become the linchpin for her squad's survival, the pivot around which their lives turned. And even as a round hit a target so close it sent splinters of metal into the air like deadly confetti, Ace's mind raced through contingencies, escape routes, fallback positions, and worst-case scenarios, each one meticulously considered as she led her soldiers through the first chaotic, shocking, adrenaline-soaked minutes of what would undoubtedly be one of the most harrowing engagements of their military careers. And as the sound of gunfire echoed off the distant hills, mingling with shouted orders, bullets ricocheting, and the occasional curse, she realized with a mix of grim satisfaction and anxious anticipation that their routine morning at the range had transformed into the crucible that would define them all, testing courage, wit, and the bonds of trust in ways that no drill could ever simulate, and she whispered under her breath, a private mantra against the fear, "Let's see what you've got," eyes narrowing on the ridge where shadows shifted, as the enemy prepared their next move, unaware that they had just awakened a storm in the form of a woman who cleaned rifles for a living but fought like a force of nature, and in that tense, electrifying moment, Ace knew this was only the beginning, the first pulse of a battle that would push every soldier to their limits, forge new legends, and leave scars that would last far beyond the range. As she steadied her breathing, whispered one last sarcastic quip to the soldiers behind her to keep spirits high despite the chaos, and prepared for the onslaught she knew was coming, bullets still whizzing, her squad poised. The line between humor and terror razor thin, in a world where every second, every decision, could mean the difference between life and death. The moment the bullets stopped their immediate chorus, the squad barely had time to breathe before the realization hit. This was no isolated attack. The enemy was closing in, their shadows stretching across the range like a dark tide moving deliberately toward them, and Sergeant Ayanna Ace Williams felt the familiar spike of adrenaline as she assessed the terrain, the positions of her soldiers, and the dangers hiding in every ridge, ditch, and abandoned shooting lane, barking rapid-fire orders. That balanced authority and clarity, form a perimeter. Jenkins, left sector. Carter, cover fire on my mark. Lopez, get eyes on that ridge, now. And as her squad scrambled, bullets ricocheting from every metallic surface, the medic sprinting to check on the wounded, Ace's mind raced through every possible scenario, every training exercise she had ever run through, every past engagement where improvisation meant survival, all the while dodging a hail of enemy fire that struck dangerously close, kicking up clouds of dust and rock. A cacophony of sound that made the world shrink to the immediate chaos around her, and in that shrinking world, humor became an invisible armor, a way to keep fear at bay, so she muttered under her breath, "Well, at least they didn't bring a marching band," earning a strangled laugh from Carter even as he squeezed the trigger of his rifle, sending rounds downrange with precise bursts, pinning the enemy behind scattered boulders, and in the midst of the chaos, she caught sight of Jenkins faltering, his knees nearly buckling under the weight of adrenaline and fear. And with a firm grip on his shoulder, she muttered, "You've got this. Eyes up, focus on the target, not the terror," and the younger soldier nodded, swallowing hard as he reloaded and re-engaged, the trust between leader and soldier cementing in a heartbeat of shared danger, while Ace herself calculated every step forward, every movement across the open ground that might leave them exposed, scanning for signs of ambush, listening to the subtle clicks, shuffles, and distant orders that betrayed the enemy's strategy. And then it hit her, there was a squad flanking them from the northeast, moving with a discipline that suggested prior reconnaissance, their shadows melting into the terrain like predators stalking prey, and she knew the next moments would demand not just courage but split-second tactical brilliance, so she signaled a retreat to more defensible positions, her voice cutting through the gunfire, precise and commanding, "Back to cover. Move fast, move low. Jenkins, suppress their advance." And the squad moved like a well-oiled machine under her guidance, ducking behind overturned steel crates, sandbags, and shattered wooden frames, every step a negotiation between life and death, while she kept her eyes on the ridge, calculating angles, probable enemy firing zones, and escape paths, the mental map forming and reforming with each heartbeat. And even as she executed these calculations, a flash of movement caught her attention, a glint of a rifle barrel, the telltale shine of a scope, confirming that this was no random encounter, no stray gunfire, but a coordinated strike, a deliberate test of their response, and that knowledge steeled her resolve, sharpening her focus, turning fear into a tool rather than a liability. And as the squad returned fire, each member executing their assigned task with precision born of countless drills and real-world engagements, Ace couldn't help but notice the human element in the chaos, the fear and courage intertwined, the subtle moments where humor kept them alive just as much as bullets and strategy, like the quick, whispered quip she sent to Carter. But they didn't expect us to be cleaning rifles and still be lethal, which earned a grin and a nod even as rounds kicked up dust around them, and she felt the delicate balance of leadership, where one misstep could cost lives, one hesitation could be fatal, yet every command, every observation, was a thread holding the squad together in a tapestry of chaos, the enemy pressing, probing, testing their cohesion, and then a sudden scream pierced the gunfire. A soldier had been hit, the sharp cry cutting through the noise, grounding Ace in a reality where training met mortality, and she sprinted toward the injured man, weaving between fire, shouting orders to cover her movement, while the medic raced to stabilize him, her mind a whirlwind of calculations, risk assessment, and the raw, human urgency of saving a life, all while maintaining situational awareness, keeping track of every shooter, every shadow, every glint of metal that could signal a new threat. And even as the wounded soldier groaned, Ace caught a glimpse of the enemy adjusting their positions, flanking, trying to squeeze them into a kill zone, and she barked to her squad, "Fall back to the next line of cover, suppressing fire on my mark. Move, move, move." And they obeyed instantly, the trust between leader and soldiers palpable, forged in moments of extreme danger, and in the midst of retreating, bullets kicking up sparks from rocks, dirt, and metal, she noticed a peculiar pattern. The enemy wasn't just attacking randomly. They were setting traps, anticipating reactions, almost predicting her movements, which only heightened the tension, forcing Ace to improvise constantly, to outthink a foe that seemed to know her every strategy. And even as she calculated, she kept morale high with small doses of humor, whispering to Jenkins, who was panicking slightly, "Remember, if we survive this, you owe me a sandwich for every round you wasted," which earned a snort of laughter and the slight easing of tension, and she pressed on, moving toward a more defensible position, evaluating the terrain for choke points, lines of sight, and natural cover, while directing her squad to cover fire, reposition, and tend to the wounded, every decision a delicate balancing act between offense and defense, caution and aggression, fear and determination. And the enemy continued their push, shadows shifting in the dusty haze, bullets kicking up earth and sparks in a relentless rhythm, until Ace realized the worst-case scenario was already unfolding. They were being funneled into a confined zone where mobility would be limited, and a misstep could be catastrophic. And she made the split-second decision to create an improvised barricade using overturned targets, sandbags, and debris, signaling to Carter to provide suppressive fire while Jenkins and Lopez moved wounded soldiers behind cover. And in those tense moments, she felt the weight of command in every fiber of her being, the responsibility for lives that depended on her instincts and decisions. And yet, amid all the chaos, she never lost her presence of mind, constantly scanning, constantly adjusting, constantly motivating her soldiers, whispering humor, issuing orders, giving tactical advice, and preparing for the next inevitable wave of enemy assault, bullets continuing to shred the air, dust and sparks flying, the landscape of the range transformed into a living battlefield. And as she ducked behind a reinforced steel barrier, her eyes locking onto movement in the distant trees, the unmistakable signs of coordinated enemy flanking, she realized this ambush was far more than a chance encounter. It was a test, a calculated strike. And their survival depended on precision, courage, and the unshakable trust she had built with her squad. And as the sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the battlefield, Ace steeled herself for the next phase of combat, knowing that every decision from this point on would have immediate, tangible consequences, that every order could be the difference between life and death. And as the first wave of the enemy prepared for another push, she whispered under her breath, a private acknowledgement of the danger and her determination. "All right, let's show them what cleaning the range really means," the words both a challenge and a promise. As the battle escalated into a tense, adrenaline-fueled dance of strategy, courage, and raw survival instincts, the outcome still uncertain, the enemy pressing, the squad relying on her, and Sergeant Ayanna Williams ready to lead them through the chaos. Sergeant Ayanna Ace Williams crouched behind the jagged remains of a toppled concrete target, scanning the ridge where enemy shadows flitted like predators, her mind racing as she calculated angles, distances, and the risk of every possible movement, and then she spotted it, a narrow, treacherous path leading through what appeared to be a minefield, abandoned yet clearly still deadly, and even as the adrenaline surged, her sense of humor flickered like a safety valve, muttering to herself. Because why would survival be boring? While her squad huddled close, faces pale, muscles tense, every eye fixed on her for guidance, and she knew that this was the kind of decision that would define them, that one wrong step could obliterate months of careful training and trust, so she took a deep breath, weighing the options, stay and risk being pinned down by the enemy flanking their position, or traverse the minefield, gamble on their nerve and skill, and hope that every foot placement was precise, and she voiced her decision sharply yet reassuringly, we move. One step at a time, follow my lead, no rushing, no panicking. Jenkins, watch my step, mirror me exactly. Carter, suppress if anything moves, and as they prepared, bullets still kicking up dirt from distant gunfire, Ace's gaze swept the field again, noting subtle disturbances in the soil, rocks slightly out of place, remnants of prior explosions, every tiny detail a clue to avoid disaster, and as they stepped cautiously, Ace's inner voice reminded her that trust and communication were their lifelines. If you see something, speak it. If I make a move, replicate it. We survived together, and the squad moved like a synchronized unit, each soldier placing feet carefully, hands gripping weapons tightly, breath held, adrenaline sharpening reflexes, yet humor still threaded through her mind as she whispered to Carter, think of it as an extreme obstacle course, winner gets bragging rights, which elicited a nervous chuckle, a small but vital spark of morale in the tense silence. And every step was a negotiation with death, the soft click of the soil beneath. Boots sounding like a warning bell, yet Ace's leadership kept them calm, focused, precise, constantly scanning for movement, listening for subtle auditory cues of enemy presence, every instinct screaming that one misstep could trigger disaster. And even as they navigated the first half of the field, a rustle in the distant bushes caught her eye, a shadow moving against the light, and she signaled Carter to lay down suppressive fire, the crack of bullets masking their careful advance, and in those moments, Ace's mind was a whirlwind of tactical calculations, moral responsibility, and raw, unfiltered survival instinct, imagining scenarios, predicting enemy reactions, all while ensuring her soldiers felt the calm authority that belied the chaos around them. And just as they reached the midpoint of the minefield, a sudden explosion rocked the ground, throwing dirt and fragments into the air, the shockwave knocking Ace off balance for a heartbeat, and instinctively she dove forward, grabbing Jenkins and dragging him to safety, shouting, check your footing. Eyes on the ground. Move, move, move. And as they scrambled to regain their rhythm, she assessed the damage, no one critically injured, but the message was clear, the enemy was closer than they realized, setting traps, probing, testing them at every step, and the squad's nerves were taut, every glance sharp, every muscle ready to spring, yet Ace's humor and steady command kept them grounded, joking softly, all right, who packed the invisible tripwires? Really creative, eliciting strained laughter that somehow kept panic at bay, and as they continued inching forward, bullets from distant positions punctuated the tense silence between explosions, reminding them that time was limited, that every second spent crossing this field increased the chance of discovery or misstep, and Ace's mind flipped between micro-decisions. Which rocks offered cover, which depressions could hide them from line of sight, how to coordinate suppressive fire with movement, and how to keep every soldier calm and focused, all while a creeping tension grew as shadows indicated that the enemy might be anticipating their path, watching, waiting for one of them to falter, yet Ace refused to show hesitation, moving with the fluid confidence of a soldier who had walked through worse, cracking brief quips to her squad to keep morale, keep it slow, keep it steady, one false move and you'll owe me lunch. Which even in the chaos elicited small smiles, vital for their mental stamina, and then a sudden scream shattered the tense rhythm, a round from the enemy hitting dangerously close to Lopez's position, shrapnel scratching his armor, and Ace dove across the last few feet of safe ground, grabbing his arm and pulling him into cover, assessing his condition. You good? Shake it off, we're almost out. And the medic moved quickly, checking for injuries while the rest of the squad laid down fire to mask their retreat, every movement choreographed, instinctive, vital, and as they reached the final safe zone at the edge of the minefield, Ace allowed herself a brief breath, noting the pounding of her heart, the sweat and grime on her face, the way her squad was shaken but intact. And she knew this temporary victory was just the first step in a larger, more dangerous engagement, and as they regrouped, She scanned the surrounding ridges, noting enemy positions, anticipating moves, planning contingencies, and in the quiet moments between gunfire, she allowed a sliver of humor to escape, whispering to Jenkins, "Congratulations, you officially survived the world's deadliest cleaning exercise," eliciting a weak but genuine grin, while Carter muttered under his breath, "I'm never volunteering to polish metal again," and even Lopez, bruised but breathing, shook his head with a faint laugh, and in that brief moment of levity, Ace reminded herself why leadership wasn't just about tactics, it was about maintaining spirit under fire. Balancing fear with humor, courage with compassion, and as they moved toward higher ground for better positioning, she mentally ran through their next steps, anticipating the enemy's flanking maneuvers, noting terrain advantages, and planning suppressive fire lanes, all while keeping her soldiers' morale high with light-hearted quips and unwavering confidence, even as the distant thrum of gunfire warned that the enemy was regrouping, preparing another strike, and Ace knew they had survived the first test, but that survival required continuous vigilance, split-second decision-making, and trust in each other. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the battlefield, she whispered under her breath, "All right, the minefield didn't get us. Let's see what they try next." Eyes narrowing on the ridge where enemy movement indicated preparation, every nerve on high alert, ready for the next phase of the deadly game, knowing that each choice, each step, each command could tip the balance between survival and disaster, and Sergeant Ayanna Ace Williams led her squad onward, poised, precise, and unyielding, as the enemy waited, the next ambush looming, the tension electric, and the line between humor and horror razor-thin, a crucible that would test every ounce of courage, skill, and trust the squad possessed. Night fell like a heavy curtain over the range, shadows stretching and merging with the terrain, turning familiar landmarks into potential threats, and Sergeant Ayanna Ace Williams adjusted her night vision goggles, scanning the darkness as she whispered terse, precise commands to her squad, "Eyes up, move slow, stay silent. Jenkins, left flank, Carter, right. Lopez, watch our rear," and even in the near-complete darkness, bullets occasionally kicked up dirt nearby, their trajectories traced by sparks or the flash of a muzzle, reminding them that the enemy was not just nearby, they were alert, intelligent, and likely expecting some reaction, and Ace's mind raced through every possible infiltration strategy the enemy might employ, every potential ambush point, every shadow that could hide a sniper or a drone, while she kept her humor lightly threaded through her words, murmuring under her breath, "Nothing like a midnight stroll through a death trap to make you appreciate Starbucks," earning muffled chuckles from her squad and keeping nerves from snapping, and as they moved cautiously along a narrow path that wound between rocky outcroppings, Ace's instinct screamed that something was off, the crunch of a branch, the whisper of movement too deliberate to be random, and she immediately signaled a halt, hands slicing the air in the universal Army stop gesture, scanning the darkness with a precision born of countless drills and combat experience, noting the faint outline of figures moving just beyond natural cover, coordinating through subtle hand signals and low whispers as Carter laid down suppressive fire to mask their next movements, bullets sparking against hidden metal, creating a staccato rhythm that blended with the night sounds. And Ace felt the familiar cocktail of adrenaline, fear, and focus surge through her, the weight of responsibility anchoring her, sharpening her senses, making each sound, shadow, and movement a potential clue or threat, while her squad mirrored her concentration, muscles coiled, weapons ready, eyes wide behind goggles, and even in the tension, Ace injected small quips to keep them balanced, whispering to Jenkins, "Silent night, deadly night. Love the alliteration, right?" Which drew a tense laugh, a fleeting reminder of humanity amid chaos, and as they advanced, Ace noticed faint footprints illuminated under the moonlight, subtle disturbances in dust and soil indicating recent enemy movement, confirming her suspicion that this was no random patrol, they were being hunted, studied, and maneuvered into a trap, and she adjusted their path accordingly, leading them through depressions and shadowed gullies, always mindful of cover. Always scanning for muzzle flashes or reflective sights, while maintaining the tightest formation possible without restricting movement, her leadership a delicate blend of decisiveness and flexibility, and as they reached a cluster of abandoned training huts, Ace made the split-second decision to use them as a temporary stronghold, signaling to her squad to fan out and establish overwatch. While she positioned herself near the center to observe multiple angles, her rifle raised and finger ready. Eyes darting between potential threats, noting movement in the distance, and whispering calm instructions, "Cover the windows. Don't fire unless I say so. Keep quiet but alert." Let them make the mistake, and her squad obeyed instantly, each soldier moving like shadows themselves, silent, precise, coiled like springs, every step calculated, every glance measured, while outside, the enemy seemed to shift, almost in rhythm with their movements, testing, probing, waiting, and Ace knew that a single misstep could reveal them completely, but her humor, confidence, and clear-headedness kept her squad grounded, preventing panic from taking hold, even as she caught the faint red glow of a distant drone, hovering and scanning, likely coordinating enemy movement, and with a swift hand signal, she directed Carter to use a smoke grenade in a distant field to obscure visibility, the tiny flare of orange igniting, smoke billowing, masking their silhouettes, and she moved along the perimeter, checking each soldier's readiness, whispering, "Eyes up, ears open, breathe steady. We've got this." And even as shadows flickered and the enemy seemed to anticipate each move, her squad followed, trusting her judgment implicitly, while a subtle layer of tension permeated every step, every whispered word, every tiny movement, bullets occasionally kicking up sparks in the near distance, reminding them that the enemy's reach was long and their patience was enduring, and in that moment, Ace realized that survival depended on rhythm, control, and exploiting the enemy's assumptions. So she orchestrated their movement like a conductor with an orchestra of trained professionals, shifting positions, reassigning sectors, adjusting lines of sight, all while maintaining her sarcastic, dry humor, whispering, "Who knew stealth could be this exhausting?" which earned a stifled grin from Lopez, calming nerves just enough to maintain focus, and as they approached a ridge overlooking a narrow valley, Ace spotted subtle movements, shadows too deliberate, reflecting her earlier suspicion that the enemy was not just observing, they were planning their next strike, coordinating flanks, and probably calculating exactly when her squad would make the first move, and with a deep, controlled inhale, she whispered, "We're bait. Let's be smart bait," and instructed Carter to set a trip flare along a concealed path, while Jenkins laid down a controlled burst of fire to simulate movement and draw attention, all in an effort to manipulate the enemy's perception, while Ace herself prepared for a potential counter-assault, checking weapons, ensuring ammo, and giving quiet nods of encouragement, while keeping her eyes on every shadow, every glint of movement, every hint of intent, and as the night deepened, they became phantoms in the darkness, moving silently, fluidly, a deadly whisper of strategy against a calculating adversary, all while Ace balanced the tension with small doses of humor and reassurance, whispering to the squad, "If we survive this, I vote we never clean rifles in daylight again," earning a quiet, shared laugh, and in those rare moments, the human element shone through, the fear, the trust, the camaraderie, and the unspoken bond forged under fire, and as they reached the edge of the valley, Ace noticed the first real sign of infiltration, a shadow slipping between two large rocks, clearly attempting to flank them silently, and with a low, commanding whisper, she directed Carter to suppress with precise bursts while she repositioned Jenkins and Lopez to cover angles, the choreography executed flawlessly, bullets singing through the night, sparks and dirt kicking up with every impact, and Ace felt the exhilarating tension of control and chaos intertwined, knowing that every decision, every step, every whispered word could mean survival or catastrophe. And as the enemy attempted to encircle them, she orchestrated a series of moves that kept them off balance, buying precious seconds, her mind a blur of calculations, instinct, and experience, and even in the midst of near-total darkness, humor threaded through her instructions, whispers, and gestures, sustaining morale just enough to maintain cohesion. And as the squad settled temporarily behind a natural ridge, Ace allowed a brief glance at her soldiers, faces tense but focused, eyes sharp, ready, and she felt a surge of pride tempered with worry, knowing that the night was far from over, that the enemy was patient, intelligent, and relentless, and as she whispered under her breath, "We've made it this far, now let's see what the darkness has in store." The night held its breath, the squad silent, every sense alert, the balance between suspense, strategy, and survival razor thin, and Sergeant Ayanna Ace Williams prepared to lead them through the next phase of infiltration, every nerve on edge, every decision weighted with consequence, the shadows alive with threat, and the first pulse of the enemy's next move shimmering just beyond sight, promising chaos, challenge, and the test of everything they had endured so far. The first signs of the village emerged under the faint glow of a rising moon, broken rooftops and narrow alleyways stretching before Sergeant Ayanna Ace Williams like a labyrinth designed to trap the unwary, and she felt that familiar tightening of her chest, the thrill and terror of urban combat, but she shoved it aside, scanning every doorway, window, and shadow as she whispered rapid-fire orders to her squad. Jenkins, alley left. Carter, cover that roofline. Lopez, rear entry, eyes open. And even as they advanced, every footstep careful, deliberate, she could feel the weight of anticipation in the air, bullets occasionally pinging off metal trash bins and shattered walls, each one a reminder that the enemy was near, watching, waiting, testing their patience. and yet Ace balanced the tension with her trademark humor, muttering quietly, "Welcome to the world's deadliest urban scavenger hunt, prize. Survival," earning stifled laughs from her squad. The brief levity a fragile shield against the mounting stress, and as they moved through narrow alleys, the air thick with dust and the faint scent of smoke, Ace caught a flicker of movement in a broken doorway, a shadow that didn't belong, and with a sharp signal, Carter opened fire with controlled bursts, forcing the figure to retreat into darkness, the sound of gunfire echoing off the crumbling walls, while Ace shifted her squad to cover multiple angles, positioning them in a staggered formation that maximized both offense and defense, and even as bullets cracked nearby, she remained the calm center of the storm, her eyes constantly scanning, calculating, predicting enemy movement, and her mind raced through contingencies, fallback positions, and suppressive fire options, all while whispering brief instructions: "Keep low, keep quiet, don't expose yourself unless necessary," each word precise. Each command weighted with consequence, and then it happened, an enemy emerged from a side alley, gun raised, and Ace instinctively rolled to the side, firing a precise round that neutralized the threat, her reflexes honed through countless drills and past encounters, while Carter and Jenkins simultaneously covered the flanks, bullets slicing through the air with deadly intent, and as the squad regrouped in the cover of a partially destroyed building, Ace felt the adrenaline surge, the combined thrill of danger, control, and responsibility, knowing that every step could be fatal, yet trusting in her squad's skill, training, and cohesion, and as they peeked through broken windows and collapsed walls, she noticed a pattern in enemy movements, deliberate, coordinated, almost anticipating their every maneuver, which meant the village itself was a trap, a puzzle designed to channel them into kill zones, and Ace's mind raced to counter it, whispering low directives to adjust positions, shift fire lanes, and use shadows and debris as improvised cover, while keeping her humor quietly threaded, murmuring to Jenkins, "Nothing like a little architectural hazard to spice up your evening," eliciting a nervous chuckle that somehow steadied nerves, and the squad moved in a deadly ballet, exchanging suppressive fire with the enemy, neutralizing threats one by one, each shot calculated, each step measured, and even as the sounds of battle reverberated through narrow streets, she maintained awareness of every soldier, every angle, every possible hazard, and then came the scream, a soldier caught in crossfire, falling with a heavy thud, and Ace lunged, grabbing him and dragging him behind cover, assessing his injuries while shouting over the chaos, "Medics, now! Cover fire, don't stop," and the medic moved quickly, stabilizing the wounded man while the rest of the squad maintained suppressive fire, bullets cracking and ricocheting, debris flying, dust and smoke creating a swirling haze, and Ace felt the raw intensity of close-quarters combat, the exhilaration, the fear, the moral weight of decisions made in fractions of seconds, and even in this deadly storm, her humor and leadership kept her squad cohesive, whispering brief, sarcastic remarks to maintain focus. "All right, team," who said urban exploration was boring, drawing a brief smile through gritted teeth, while they advanced cautiously, every doorway, alley, and rooftop treated as a potential ambush point, and Ace's eyes flicked to every detail, the glint of metal, the faintest rustle, the movement of shadows, predicting enemy actions, issuing silent hand signals to adjust positions, all while keeping her soldiers calm yet alert, ready to respond instantaneously to threats, and as they moved deeper into the village, the enemy became more aggressive, flanking from rooftops and hidden alleyways, forcing the squad into tighter formations, their training tested to the limit, yet Ace's presence anchored them, her voice calm but commanding, her humor threading through the tension, her decisions precise, and then a sudden explosion rocked a nearby building, sending dust, bricks, and splintered wood into the air, forcing everyone to duck instinctively, and in that moment, Ace realized that the enemy was not only using the environment but shaping it, manipulating the chaos to their advantage, and she countered with split-second decisions, directing suppressive fire, repositioning soldiers, and improvising cover, all while monitoring every possible angle of attack, and even as the squad fired, ducked, and advanced, Ace noticed a pattern in the enemy's retreat and advance, a rhythm, almost choreographed, that suggested a central leader coordinating their every move, and with a deep, controlled breath, she adjusted her strategy, directing her squad to exploit gaps, create ambushes of their own, and use the narrow streets to channel the enemy into kill zones, all while whispering humor and reassurance to maintain morale. "We're rewriting their choreography, one bullet at a time, earning strained but genuine smiles," and the squad moved like shadows themselves, suppressing, advancing, covering, rescuing, and surviving in a deadly interplay of skill, instinct, and sheer nerve, until finally, after what felt like hours compressed into moments, the immediate threat was neutralized. The streets temporarily quiet except for the faint moans of the wounded, the crackle of smoldering debris, and the echo of distant gunfire, and Ace allowed a brief moment to assess her squad, faces tense, bodies exhausted, but eyes sharp, ready, alive, and she realized that despite the chaos, the fear, and the moral weight of their actions, they had survived not just because of training or luck, but because of cohesion, trust, leadership, and the unspoken bond forged in fire, and even as she whispered quiet words of encouragement. Good work, everyone. But stay sharp. They're still out there. She knew the battle was far from over, the enemy leader likely regrouping, planning, waiting, and as the squad tended to their wounded, reorganized, and prepared for the next inevitable wave of combat, Ace felt that surge of pride and responsibility, the thrill and terror of close-quarters combat mingling in a heady, almost addictive mix, and as the moonlight reflected off shattered windows, debris, and weapons, she whispered to herself, a private acknowledgement of the danger and resolve. This village just met its match, and Sergeant Ayanna Ace Williams, with her squad alive and focused, prepared for the next phase, knowing that the enemy was patient, intelligent, and ruthless, but that together, they were a force to be reckoned with, shadows dancing across crumbling walls, bullets still a threat, and every decision, every move, every ounce of skill and humor threaded through tension, a razor's edge between survival and catastrophe, as the night continued to stretch and the enemy's plan remained a shadowy, looming threat on the horizon. Dawn crept over the shattered village, casting long, sharp shadows across the debris-strewn streets, and Sergeant Ayanna Ace Williams crouched behind a crumbling wall, scanning the remnants of the battlefield, her mind buzzing with exhaustion, adrenaline, and the gnawing weight of responsibility, knowing that every decision she made could cost lives, not just hers or her squad's, but potentially innocent civilians still trapped somewhere in the chaos. And as she observed the enemy movements, shifts in shadow, the faint glint of weapons, the subtle rearrangement of rubble, it became painfully clear that their adversaries were reorganizing, preparing for a renewed assault, perhaps even desperate now, making them even more dangerous, and Ace realized the dilemma. Push forward aggressively and risk ambushing civilians, hold position and risk being overrun, or attempt a flanking maneuver through unexplored streets that could cut off the enemy but expose her squad to unseen dangers, and the tension coiled in her gut as she weighed options, whispering softly to herself, one wrong choice, one. She turned to Jenkins, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his weapon, and gave him a firm, grounding nod. We make it together. Every move, every step. Trust your instincts, trust me. While Carter checked ammo, his brow furrowed, muttering under his breath, I didn't sign up for ethical math problems, and even Lopez, normally stoic, tightened his jaw, scanning the streets, the moral weight pressing on them all, and Ace knew that humor, though strained, could still hold the squad together, so she whispered, guess this is where we get to be both tacticians and philosophers. Fun combo, right? Earning a small, tension-breaking laugh, but only briefly, because survival demanded focus, and focus demanded clarity, and Ace made her decision. They would flank through the narrow, partially collapsed alley to cut off the enemy's reinforcement route while simultaneously covering potential civilian escape paths, a risky move, but one that balanced tactical advantage and moral responsibility. And she issued concise, low whispers, Carter, rear suppression, Jenkins, left. Flank, Lopez, cover the alley. We move on my mark. Eyes sharp, heart steady. And as they advanced, every step was calculated, every shadow a potential threat, every noise a possible distraction, and Ace's humor threaded lightly through the tension, whispering, if we survive this, I'm charging everyone in the squad for therapy, drawing a weak but genuine grin from Jenkins, grounding them in the humanity that the chaos threatened to consume, and then, suddenly, a child's scream pierced the tension, echoing from the alley ahead, freezing Ace's blood midstream, her heart lurching as she realized that civilians had been caught in the crossfire. The stakes multiplied exponentially, and in that instant, she had to make a split-second decision, engage the enemy now and risk hitting the innocent, or advance cautiously to secure the child first, knowing that delay could give the enemy an opening, and Ace's mind spun with tactical calculations, every probability running in milliseconds, until she chose decisively, Jenkins, cover me. Carter, suppress the ridge. Lopez, with me, child first, and she moved with lethal precision, scanning every doorway, crouching low, every muscle coiled, every sense on fire, as they maneuvered through the alley, and the enemy, unaware of the civilian, took shots, bullets whizzing dangerously close, splintering wood and brick, kicking up dust, and Ace lunged, grabbing the child as a bullet grazed the wall inches from their heads, whispering reassurance, you're safe now. I've got you, while simultaneously signaling Lopez and Carter to neutralize the flanking enemy, the choreography executed flawlessly, bullets cracking, sparks flying, debris collapsing, every movement deliberate, every breath held, every decision life-saving. And as they cleared the alley, Ace realized that one of her squad, Jenkins, had been grazed in the shoulder, pain etched across his face, and she crouched beside him, applying a field dressing, whispering calm encouragement, "Hang in there, you're tougher than you think." And even as he winced, she felt the weight of command in full force, every choice, every action, the moral and physical consequences entwined, and yet, they pressed forward, navigating the village, flanking, securing civilians, neutralizing threats, her humor woven into tense commentary. "Okay,